morning.
Good morning.
Happy birthday to Wolf. He lives next door. Please feel free to move around if it makes it easier to see, more comfortable. Before I start with the talk this morning, there's a couple things I wanted to mention. One is that we are paying close attention to the continual unfolding of COVID, and we're paying attention. And there may be adjustments that will come in terms of masks and those types of things. But just please check the website, and if you receive the weekly digest, that's a good way to see how those things are unfolding. Right now we're waiting for the county. The county has some guidelines they're putting in front of the commissioners, is my understanding, about how we may face where we are right now. So the second thing is, in mid-September, we will start a practice period, and that will go up through December. And during that time, there's going to be all kinds of different ways to get involved in different classes and small groups of people who meet to study different things or to reflect on different parts of the Buddha Dharma, a term student program, and many other things. So if you're oftentimes August, when you start feeling, you notice how the autumn wind is just slightly, it's hot, but there's this slight tinge of the autumn, especially at nighttime. If you can hear the crickets, and there's the kind of way that it's cooling. I find that oftentimes people's heart starts turning a little towards like, oh, okay, I want to study something more. I want to jump into something. Not exactly yet. I want to go swimming and do all these other things for another month, but you might start feeling that. So if you are, just know that that's happening. There'll be a preview that should be in the mailer this week or perhaps next week. There's kind of preview the kind of things that'll happen, and then the full menu with explanations and sign-ups and stuff will come around the end of August. So for the past couple weeks, I've been, I think, somewhat clumsily leading you into an idea, and hopefully in your own meditation that you've been trying some of the things that I've been presenting and developing some experience with them. I've been encouraging you to investigate or inquire into the indivisibility of mind and matter. Now, this is a classical division in Western philosophy and spirituality, and it's not the same in many other places, but being here, living in a culture that is so largely informed by the Western philosophical and spiritual tradition, I would say that all of us carry that divided heart between matter and mind in some way. In fact, we even turn the investigation of mind itself into matter. We phenomenalize mind, try to measure it, try to quantify, and do all of those things in a very, I think, it can be very productive, but it also has a cost. And so I've been trying to resist making too strong of a philosophical case for why this is important and keep this more focused on practice. But I'm sure that some of the philosophical stuff also has been sneaking in. We think about this fundamental duality that we tend to come to our life with. We think there are things, and then I am experiencing things. And the experience of things is what it means to be, what it means to have consciousness, but that is a very subjective thing, and that what is real are these things that I'm experiencing. And it's almost like a passive thing. I'm walking through life, I'm moving through life day to day, and I'm encountering these different things. Sometimes when I say matter, I don't only mean physical matter, but it could also mean just any kind of phenomena. Thoughts, experiences are thought of as being the encounter of some phenomena. And so I've been inviting you to this inquiry about paying attention paying attention to how it is that experience happens. And so in meditation, we can investigate this very directly. We're endeavoring to pay attention and to let go of all of the externalizing that we're doing moment after moment after moment after moment. Car door slams. You immediately, oh, there's a car there. Maybe it was a voice of a girl. Did that sound like that to you? You heard that? So now you have a picture that appears in your mind, right? There's something over there. And it is, in fact. I mean, probably someone could lean out the door and say, oh yeah, it was a red car, it was a green car. So I'm not saying that there isn't anything out there, or that there's nothing happening, but just saying how quickly we regard that as an exterior thing. I'm in here, that's out there. Okay, I could ignore it, it's not important to what I'm doing right now. And so what I've been saying is that a part of this inquiry that I'm encouraging you to is to loosen up on that. And so last week we did a little exercise with listening to sound and letting go, as you hear the sound, of the ways in which you externalize that as a phenomena out there. And you receive it as being something which really is undividable. Your perception of the sound of the car, the experience of the sound of the car, and the car can't really be cleanly taken apart. This is very core Buddhist teaching. It's called dependent arising. And it is the analysis which the Buddha brought to people to say, look, there's nothing that exists independently. And when we look at that out there, we can see it, right? We say like, oh, for there to be this beautiful plum tree that's in the garden, there has to be water, and there has to be sun, and there had to be a seed, and there has to be earth, and there has to be all of those things that come together, you know. People say like the stars are in the plum, right? Whatever matter is in that plum has also been part of a star. Well, that's trippy and cool, right? But notice how that's still pretty externalized. It's like we're talking about how things out there fit together. What I'm saying here is, what about the phenomena of the plum tree? The phenomena of anything that you could see or hear, or touch or taste or think, that your perceiving of it is also totally involved. For there to be the phenomena of the plum tree requires your participation. Right? So as we pay attention in Zazen, sometimes we're first learning to sit Zazen and we think like, hold my mind still, hold my mind still, hold my mind still. By the way, that's a good thing to try and do. But don't get too hard on yourself if you're not successful. Actually, it's one of those things you try to do to see how, it's not really something that's so obvious to be done, right? A quiet mind is not just a mind that has been rigidly held still. There's something else about a quiet mind. So that if you just try to hold it still, it's valuable. You get to see how that's not really, doesn't really work. But it can also keep the question going, well, what is a quiet mind then? I've met people with quiet minds. How do they do that? When you're a kid, you see someone ride a bicycle. You're like, dang, how do they do that? And you got to get on the bike and fall off and fall off and fall off. And then pretty soon you find it. And so paying attention rather than holding your attention on something to opening your attention to something. That's a slight difference. It's very slight, but makes all the difference in what's happening there in the meditation. And that all phenomena become a kind of skillful means through this practice. Skillful means is a Buddhist technical term that means that the Buddhist teaching of liberation comes in a myriad numbers of shapes and sounds and forms. There's not just one truth that could be written down, like carved on a tablet, and then everyone could look at it and know that that's true. That the true mind of the Buddha's awakening, when it meets every individual being, it will look, taste, feel like something different. Because every one of those beings is a different being with their own causes and conditions, their own karma. So every one of you has your own karma. So the Buddha Dharma will it will reach you in the unique way that it reaches you. That's the teaching of skillful means. So in this thing that I'm presenting, phenomena become skillful means when we regard them with that undivided attention, right? Attention that is not putting stock in the out there and the in there-ness of it, but simply opening the hand and allowing the actuality to be present. So, I'd like to go into another layer of this today. I've been speaking a bit about breaking up the frames of reduction, that we tend to take any type of experience and we reduce it to something, as in the way that we regard it. So we regard the door slamming earlier, not so interesting. I'm not that into car door slamming. I mean, like, I like books, Did you ever do that? I used to just be in the library. This book's not going to be so great at it. This is a wonderful book, but, pretty good. Did you ever do that with a book? Oh, it's so nice. Oh, that was where my bookmark was. So maybe you enjoy it, right? But I lost my place. That was so fun. Okay. So our frames of reduction, we tend to then regard something in a certain way. So car door slamming, I'm not so interested in that, And so I reduce it to, it's only a car door that's out there. Not so interesting to me. That's what I mean by a frame of reduction. We have bigger frames of reduction that aren't just locating the experience, but they are talking about things being just in your head or just out there. Or for one of the major things we do, we say like, it's not real. I'm just feeling funny today. So it couldn't be a real thing. It's just in my head. Or that's just something out there. It's just a thing. It's just a leaf. It's just a plum being eaten by the yellow jackets. Right? Not so important. So to break up those frames of reduction is part of what practice is inviting us to. Right? Because those frames of reduction, they're not usually bad in and of themselves. They allow us to do something. They allow us to see the world in a way that allows us to do something. But they also reduce our awareness, and they tend to narrow our heart, and then we become caught in that narrowing. So what I want to say is that we can actually regard experiences, things, without cutting the two apart from each other. That's not necessary. It's a habit, just like anything's a habit. To divide our experiencing of a thing and the thing, that division is a habit. And we put pressure behind it when we get nervous or upset or afraid, and we use it in that kind of a mechanism. So when you're not feeling that way, it's really good to remind yourself of the connection and to make it stronger, or to make your regard for the connection stronger, so that when you get into difficult situations, you can feel the connection more completely. Now, part of where this takes place, or part of the way we can practice this, is to start paying closer attention to how it is that our imaging or our forming or our shaping is happening in moment-to-moment experience. So if we go back to the plum tree or the car door, we say, there's a phenomenon. I'm experiencing it. Pay attention to that. What is your participation? I don't mean that in just an abstract way, although you can start in an abstract way. You could describe it. You could say I have to see the light bouncing into my eyes, or I have to hear the vibrations moving through the air and bouncing off my eardrum. Right? You could take it apart like that. Right? And that can be helpful to remind yourself, wow, plum tree's not out there. Right? Like in a really literal sense, the image, everything you're seeing right now is in your apparatus of seeing. Right? So you can take it apart that way. That can be useful. But I'm saying right in the experience of it itself, you can feel your participation. So meditation is a great place to study this. That's why last week I was saying sit and just listen. Listen, listen, listen. And any little sound, you can start to feel, how am I part of this sound? Fragrances are wonderful to do this with, if they are nice fragrances. I guess that's true of all of these. But actually the best thing is something that's pretty neutral. You know, when you're really getting into a song that just you love, you're going to kind of overinvest. It's going to be hard to see how you're doing that. Although that's fun. I don't mean to say you shouldn't do that. But this is why meditation, we just have a very neutral kind of place. Some quiet, some spaciousness. Cool. It's better if it's cool. You know, not just sitting there sweating. Just listen. As you inquire into the indivisibility in the way that I've been talking about, you know, the attention which comes from letting go of something rather than putting it into your framework, you can become increasingly sensitive to this participation of mind in phenomena. You can become increasingly sensitive. It becomes your habit to notice that the person who is driving like a jerk on the road is not just a jerk. I'm not saying they're not a jerk. I'm just saying they're not just a jerk. Like their jerkiness, you're participating in. For them to be a jerk requires your investment in the label of them being a jerk. You can feel that. You can begin to feel that more clearly. Again, if you're not doing that in meditation, when you get behind somebody who's, driving like a jerk, you're probably not going to feel it there. Now, one of the places this is so important, and this is the place where I want to point you in practice today, is as we insist on the reality of phenomena, right, over experience, when we think that the phenomena is real and I'm just experiencing it, this imaging part of our mind, right, this part that shapes and forms, it gets trapped. It gets trapped in the habit of continually turning itself out into the world, turning itself out to become a car, to become a tree, to become a thing that's real, that's not me. I'm just experiencing something, right? The real stuff's out here, and I turn it out again and again and again and again, and it goes to abstract things too. It goes to what's true. It goes to what's right. It goes to our political system. It goes to things we're angry about. It goes to our families. It goes to everything. The light goes out and turns into something, and we feel like we don't have any choice about it because we believe those things are what is really real, and I'm just experiencing them. So part of what I'm getting at here is that this forming, this shaping, this imaging, I would go so far as to call the imagination, is being trapped in this habit of the division between mind and matter, or experience and phenomena. That when we keep them separate, that part of our mind gets trapped. So the reason I want to bring forward a kind of more like little philosophical argument here, or a kind of like explanation of that process, is so much the way we regard meditation is caught in that old way. Is caught in that other way. Like you hear people say all the time, like, I just need to get rid of these thoughts and return to what's actually going on. As if what's actually going on is the material experience or the material stuff that I'm just experiencing. So you'll say like, well, I need to let go of thoughts and return to my breath. Good thing to do, right? But if you regard the thoughts as being somehow not real and your breath being real, with what are you experiencing the breath, if not thought? What is the experience of the breath if your mind is not involved? there's no experience, right? So we get these kind of, I don't know, kind of choppy, jerky ways of regarding our mind. And that's inevitable. You'll do that. You'll kind of like into your heart, and then if you're lucky, you'll kind of wake up and go, oh, whoa, wait a minute, that's not so helpful, right? Let me look for another path through. Just like when you're trying to ride the bicycle, and you're trying to hold on to the center so bad, right? You hold on to the balance. You remember that sensation? I remember that as a kid, my blue bike, my dad holding the back of it, and he'd let go at some point, and I'm trying to hold on to the center, right? You're trying to hold on to what balance is, but you can't. Holding on to balance is the very thing that kills it, right? And then you fall over, There's something else you have to do there. You actually have to let go of something for the balance to be possible. So you can feel this kind of tightness, the kind of clamp down of objectification. There's a kind of tyranny of objectifying things, to turning the mind outward again and again and again. It's not just that it's leaking out, which is a very traditional Buddhist way to talk about it, that the mind is just leaking out everywhere. But it's more, I think it's more than that. It's not just leaking out. There is a kind of a tightness in our being from creating the outside world all the time. And you can feel this in the way the world is when you sit quietly. Now, one thing is very common experience as we're sitting is we do that. We try to stay focused, try to stay aware. But we're still being aware of outside, aware of outside, aware of outside. And what happens is the consciousness kind of flips over and it will lift off of phenomena. I'm sure you've experienced this. When you're just sitting and you're like, oh, phenomenal. Yeah, I hear the kids playing. I hear everything. I'm here. It's good. I get maybe a little sleepy. Da, da, da. And then all of a sudden, you're in la la land. Right? You're just thinking about something. Maybe it's very nice. Maybe it's like you're on the beach and you're going swimming or something. Maybe it's a kind of fantasy thing. Or maybe it's just like doing Sudoku in your head or something. Or just taking one little thing that you're chewing on for whatever reason you're chewing on it and just going around and around and around and around and around in circles. So one way, if we're using this explanation that I'm giving this morning, one way to explain what's happening there is, well, we're lifting off the separation between phenomena and mind. You try to keep the mind in the phenomena, in the phenomena, in the phenomena, in the phenomena. At some points, it just goes, oh, and then it goes off here because the two are separate. Right? There's a kind of retreat into fantasy, or what we might call distraction. The mind lifts off of the external and builds its world. Can you blame it? Can you blame it? With all of the kind of forcing of it out to keep a hold of everything all the time, right? Of course it does that, In fact, I would go, this is a little radical for Zazen teaching maybe, but I would just encourage you not to begrudge it. There's a rest in just returning to mind in that way. Now, I should also say I don't really encourage you to indulge it. There's like a difference between not begrudging and indulging it. So, you can be kind. So, if we think in this way, we can start regarding some of the instructions for Zazen in a little bit different way. That they are about freeing the imagination, or freeing the imaging, freeing the connection between phenomena and experience. Very popular or common type teachings about Zazen, for example, opening the hand of thought. Many of you have heard that, I'm sure. That's Uchiyama Roshi, who's a very famous a contemporary Soto Zen teacher in Japan, and that was a term he coined, to open the hand of thought. So when you hear that teaching, right, you say, okay, if this is like my mind, right, I'm going to open the hand of thought. A closed hand, it's closed around a thought, it's holding on to the thought. If I could open it, the thought will go away. That kind of way is that we tend to think about it. Right? A little more subtle way to think about it is thought itself there's no thought inside the grabbing of the hand. A thought is the grabbing of the hand. When the mind turns itself over onto itself and holds, that's what a thought is. So all of the, if we go back to the plum tree, for example, a plum tree, you're experiencing it. You're awash with this sensation, right, through your eyes, and if maybe the wind's going through it, you can hear it, and maybe you can smell the plums, right? You have all this memory of plums that's coming up from your mind, right? Memory of the taste of the plums. I do anyway for this particular plum tree. And all of those come together, and there's a thought. So Uchiyama Roshi teaches us, Zazen is opening the hand of thought. He doesn't say cut off the hand of thought, right? He says, there's thoughts. That's what we have. We have minds. We have consciousness. So just allow them to open. Allow them to not be caught in just objectifying it into the phenomena out there, insisting on the plum tree apart from myself. That's a way we could understand what opening the hand of thought is like. Fujita Isho Roshi is another teacher, a Japanese teacher, who visited us a number of years ago. He was the head of the International Center for the Soto Zen School. And he gave this wonderful talk, and he said, he's a really intense Zazen meditator. Like, one time he was living at San Francisco Zen Center, and there was this, what do you call those things, those trapeze lines that people? Slag lines? Yeah, slag line? Yeah, there was one up right in the middle of San Francisco, out between two trees, on the sidewalk. And I was asking, what's going on with that? And they were like, oh, it's Fujita Roshi's, it's Fujita Roshi's. And so I was having dinner, and I was sitting next to him. I said, what's up with the slack line? He said, oh, it's very good for developing your muscles for walking meditation. He said, I practice on that to develop the muscles correctly so that my walking meditation is just perfect. He's like so into Zazen. He's so into Zazen. And he said, I think this is my teaching. His grandfather is Uchiyama Roshi. His grandfather in the Dharma is Uchiyama Roshi. And so he said, for me, it's sense and allow. Sense and allow. So we sense something and we allow it. Now we could take that as being, we could take that in a lot of different ways if we put it into this framework that I'm presenting this morning of freeing our imagination or freeing our imaging or freeing our mind. The sensing is the matter-of-fact truth of phenomena. That comes as a sense. It comes as a sound. It comes as light. It comes as feeling. And when we regard it as not being separate from ourself, then we can simply allow. We don't have to turn the mind out to try to hold it fixed on this phenomena that we've experienced, which is oftentimes what we think. If I'm paying attention, right, which is what you're supposed to be doing when you're meditating, cultivating awareness, that I should put it out there and then hold it. No. Sense it and allow it. Don't try to force it to stay, or to stay the same way, or for your mind to stay the same way. We have this very enigmatic statement that comes again and again in our school. Take the backward step that turns the light and shines it back. This is a very core instruction for Zazen, which is basically impossible to understand. Because it's not about understanding, right? If you could understand it and then do it, you're already outside. You're already understanding this instruction of something out there. And it's not giving you that kind of instruction. It's giving you instruction about there's no inside outside that is permanently fixed. Right? Take the backward step, and all of that light that we're shooting out and turning into phenomena, let it shine back. Let the call of the bird, or the breeze, or the fragrance, or the click of a rock, while you're sweeping. One of our ancestors, Kyogen, was awakened at the sound of a pebble hitting a rock. All of those expedient means of the senses, they're not expedient means because they're nice to you. They're expedient means because that light is coming back. You don't have to hold on. So we should settle. And that might take a little holding ourselves still, a little working with breath. Something, calm down, be present, be centered. And then to open the sense gates. Just allow what is present to be fully present. Allow the awareness to be cultivated not through trying to hold your mind on something, but whatever that phenomena is reminding you that you're completely involved. Not in an abstract way, but in your experiential way. Experience your involvement in that phenomena. And then feel for where you're clamping down, where you're insisting this way or that. And then allow. Part of your mind that is involved in the locating, imaging, classifying, etc. Free it from the habitual pattern of just saying, oh, that's what this is, that's what this is, that's what this is, that's what this is. That's why you ask what, and you don't insist on an answer. You say, what is it? Oh, is it a crow? Is it another kind of bird? Is it in distress? Is it not in distress? So that's all like what, and then look for the answer. The other what is just what. Let me shut up. Oh, what? Just what? Now the last thing I'll say about this, I was thinking I might get to it today, but I want to have some time for some questions, and I'll go into it a little bit next week, is this freeing of the imagination is also where the religious, things that seem more religious or spiritual, things that seem a little more mythological, have so much to teach us. Right in that intermediary zone where we're not insisting on the objectification of things, another way of framing the world becomes possible, or I should say many ways of framing the world become possible. And this is also what Zazen is doing. It's helping us work with the fundamental frameworks that we have for how we regard the world. We have to free our imagination to do that, because it's our imagination that is continually implementing those frameworks. It's like the base of what's continually being implemented through our consciousness. So
Hey, Joe.
Hi.
So where I struggle with this discussion is with language and how language plays in my head. And, you know, the philosophical, how do I know what I think till I see what I say, right? So you use language to organize your thoughts. But thoughts are naturally reductive. I mean, well, language is naturally reductive, right? And so how do I work with that?
Yeah. So we have a teaching that relates to this called the 3 nen. And a nen is a thought moment. And so in this teaching of the 3 nen, we say, this is also reductive, but it's like a heuristic, it's like a framework of thinking about it that can be helpful to guide practice. So the teaching says there is a sensory encounter. And then from the sensory encounter, there's a label. And then from the label, there's commentary. So while we're sitting, we can see, I mean, we don't have to be sitting to do this, but it's easier to see it while you're sitting. You can see how it's like, oh, dog barks. Or it's actually, whoa, whoa, dog barks. That damn dog. I wish the neighbors would, you know, let him inside or take him for a walk or whatever it is. Or, oh, I love that dog. Maybe I'll go over and see him. Whatever, you know, it might be positive, might be negative, might be neutral, but there's some commentary on it. You might just start thinking about your childhood dog. Or you might just start thinking about something totally different, but it is actually the commentary in some way. So what we tend to do is like sensory input, label, commentary. Sensory input, label, commentary. Sensory input, label, commentary. Commentary, commentary, label, label, commentary, label, sensory input, label, commentary, label, commentary. So we're hanging out here in the 3rd nen a lot in the conscious part of our mind. What I mean by conscious here is the little window that you look at in your head, or, you know, really through your body. So when we're sitting and we're not struggling with those, we're not externalizing even the commentary. We don't make it outside. It's part of us. It's not an extraneous thing. It is the shape of consciousness that is in regard to its own self that's spinning around. And so so as we sit, don't make it outside. Sense and allow, sense and allow, sense and allow. What we'll see is it starts to go sensory input, label, commentary, sensory input, label, sensory input, label, sensory input, label, 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 sensory input, label, commentary. It starts to work its way down. And you can study how that happens. And then if you're in a long meditation retreat, for example, you may end up just on sensory input places. No label, no commentary, and that can go for long periods of time. It's not intrinsically better to be in 1st nen than in these other nens. The problem that creates suffering is that we have habit energy in it that's pushing us towards the commentary all the time. And that habit energy pushing us to the commentary all the time, that's where we get caught up in these loops that fold back on each other. So with continual meditation, we can come down and we can study all 3 of them more clearly. Then we have a faculty, a little bit like riding the bike. We can steer, we can start to navigate in that realm in a way that we can't if we don't develop that connection. This second one, the language place, is really interesting because it's totally intertwined with the sensory input and the commentary. Like there's no real separation between these 3. So that part where you find the language being kind of separating and really strong, you're probably feeling it here. And then you can start feeling it here. That's where you can start just seeing the labels. Like, what am I labeling things? Oh, car door, crow, wind. And just see how it is there and see what the nature of language is in that relationship as opposed to the language that goes into a thought process.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So one of the, it was very useful to me for a long time, habits that I picked up from a philosophy class, was I can't remember the philosopher, but they talked about the phenomenal versus the nominal, very much pointing from our experience of a thing back to the thing, and how we don't necessarily know what the thing is except by the marks that we experience from it.
Right.
And that was really good for me for a while at kind of letting go of my, like, everything I see about an object is what it is, like that can't be true.
Right.
But then it also created a sense of separation that, and I don't, it feels like there's that's not quite true, but I don't know how to turn that around.
Yeah. So one way that into this may be, okay, let's see how it can go. So first we see a thing, right? And this problem that I've been talking about this morning, where we take our awareness of it and we turn it out, and we simply think, oh, I'm seeing that object that's out there. And so the marks that I attribute to it that allow me to see it are true. And we reify them in some way. And there's a world out there that I'm experiencing. That's kind of the problem I've been talking about this morning. Well, one of the things that's really powerful is when we see, like, oh, wow, I obviously don't see everything. Like there's a backside to the stick, right?
There's an inside and
There's an inside, right.
extra dimensional spaces.
Right, exactly. There's all kinds of things. And so my experience of it in the thing itself, I can say they're not exactly the same thing. And so then there's this feeling of separation. The interesting thing to think about and this is called out in from a Buddhist teaching, is why do we insist on there being a static thing there in the first place? Like, why do we insist that there has to be something out there that is apart from me, that has a particular set of characteristics that could be defined? I'm just incapable of defining them because I'm looking at it from my perspective, which is always limited. That is still like holding on to this shred of the objectifying. You know, there is this objective thing out there that could be identified in that way. So from a philosophical standpoint, that's where teachings of emptiness become really important. So we say, of course, there's a stick here, but this stick is completely dynamic. The more we could look into it, the more there would be. The closer we looked, the more space there would be, for example. And that we don't need to look for an edge to that. We don't need to look for an edge to the phenomena to be able to contain it. That it is spacious. Every individual phenomena is totally spacious. So the reason that's important is my limited perspective is not a problem then, because it's not set against the total spaciousness. Its total spaciousness, its total dynamic life is meeting me. What a gift. And I can regard that meeting as a gift of awareness, of consciousness, rather than thinking, well, I can't quite get it right. Of course I can't. There is no there. There's no right there. There's not the edge of the thing. That doesn't mean that if you want to make one, I carved this stick quite a few years ago, that if you want to carve it, that you want to really know where your finger and the blade are. So on one level of reality, that's a completely important and practical. But with a free awareness, it's so easy to do, right? Because paying attention to your finger is not separating your finger from the stick. It's realizing, oh, we're all part of the same, this experience I'm having is all part of the same thing. And it's not such a pull and, like tug and pull kind of environment. Now, when it comes to carving a stick, maybe that doesn't make so much difference. In a practical sense, I know that it does in your experience. It makes a big difference. If we take that out to the way that we regard the world, I would say we're seeing the effects of the insistence on an objective world. that if we can't find the aliveness of our own heart in the world and find the world in the aliveness of our own heart, how will we ever navigate the precipice which we have brought ourselves to?